I ironed the linen skirt twice that morning. The fabric was light, a soft oatmeal color that caught the breeze just right when I walked out to fetch the mail. I'd bought it last spring when I thought we'd be going somewhere for summer. Remember holding it up in the shop mirror, tilting my head. The salesgirl said it made me look ready for Italy. I didn't tell her I hadn't been on a plane since my husband died. But I smiled, and I bought it. The skirt hung in my closet. For months after that, tag still on, waiting, and then one morning in March the phone rang. It was my daughter Madison with that clipped, cheerful voice she uses when she's already thinking of something else. She was saying something about a family trip. June. A rental house somewhere by the sea. She said it casually, like it was. Already decided. I sat up straighter. She said, "We thought it would be nice for the kids, and for you, of course. You could use a little change of scene." I held the phone tighter. I asked where. She said California. I asked when. She said late June, maybe the second or third weekend. I didn't want to sound too eager, but my mouth was already moving. "That sounds lovely," I said. "Been a while since we've all done something together." There was a pause. A brief silence, like static. Then she said something about the boys needing to be off school. Then she had to go. Soccer practice. She'd send me more details later. When I hung up, I stared at the phone a long while. That night, I folded the skirt and placed it in the top drawer. Not hanging, not yet. But ready. The next morning, I pulled out my recipe box. Not the big plastic one, the small wooden one that still smells like cinnamon and dust. The one with my mother's handwriting pressed into index cards with oil stains and bent corners. I started setting aside what I might bring: my molasses cookies, the orange shortbread that Peter likes, and the iced lemon loaf that once made Madison say, "This is the only good thing to come out of your baking phase." I pretended not to notice the phase part. I just smiled and gave her the last slice. I circled the weekend in red ink on my kitchen calendar. June 21st. I drew a little sun beside it. And beneath it, I wrote, "The house by the sea." I started walking every day to build my stamina. Down past the church, then around the side of Mill Creek. My left hip stiffened by the end of the second mile, but I pushed through it. I told myself I wanted to be able to climb the rental house. Stairs easily, help with breakfast, go with them to the beach and not be in the way. I even called Dr. Myers and asked for a refill on my blood pressure pills early, just in case I'd need a full set for travel. I told Jeanette at book club. Think I said it too brightly. She looked up from her mug. "Oh, that's nice." She said, "Family time is rare these days. We're two." "Santa Barbara, I think," I replied, "or somewhere along that coast." Madison said she'd send more details. You know how she is. But it'll be all of us. Even Peter and Lacey. The boys, too. Jeanette smiled, but I saw the flicker of something behind her eyes. I ignored it. We went back to our reading, but I didn't hear the rest of the chapter. Weeks passed. I didn't want to be pushy, so I didn't ask again. Not directly. Just small things like whether they needed me to bring extra beach towels, or if I should pack some allergy meds for the boys. Each time, Madison brushed past it. "We'll figure it out soon." Or Peter's handling the rental. Swamped right now. I told myself it was fine. That families were messy, and planning takes time. That maybe they were just trying to surprise me with something. I cleaned out the guest room in case one of the boys wanted to sleep here before the trip. I bought a new sun hat, wide-brimmed, light blue, and tried on my walking sandals in the kitchen. I sat on the edge of the bathtub and painted my toenails coral pink. A little ridiculous, but I told myself it matched the joy I was holding. In reserve, Mother's Day came. They took me to brunch, rushed, loud, a little forced. Lacey scrolled through her phone most of the meal. The boys argued over waffles. Peter looked tired, and Madison barely made eye contact. But at the end, as they walked me to the car, she hugged me and said, "Don't worry, we're finalizing everything soon. You'll need your passport." Passport. "For California?" She laughed. Oh, I mean, just in case we go over the border. Canada, maybe? Peter's been looking at different places. But we'll make sure you're good. That night, I took out my passport from the desk drawer, just to be sure it wasn't expired. It wasn't. But the photo from 15 years ago stared back at me like someone I used to be. Darker hair, straighter back, a different woman. I tucked it back in the drawer with a strange sort of care. Like I was placing a fragile version of myself into a time capsule. I tried not to imagine too much. But I couldn't help it. I saw myself standing with them on a cliffside trail, the boys running ahead, Peter behind a camera. I imagined Lacey handing me a drink with a lime in it. I imagined us laughing over something that had nothing to do with who I used to be. Just joy in the moment, present, needed, seen. I even packed a little leather travel wallet, tucked in $50 bills over the weeks. Not because they'd ask, but just in case we stopped somewhere and I could pay for ice cream or gas. I wanted to contribute. I wanted them to know I wasn't just extra luggage. There were small signs, a canceled call, off. A moment when Madison asked, "Wait, did I tell you about the rental already?" When she had weeks ago. Twice, but I told myself not to read too much into it. People forget things. They get busy. Families drift and pull and drift again. But they always come back. I told myself that until I didn't quite believe it. The calendar page turned. June began. Still no flight info, no itinerary, no group chat. Just a string of vague soons and working on its big. The linen skirt hung on the outside of my closet now, pressed and ready. My suitcase sat half-packed beneath it, patient, like a pet waiting for its walk. And I began to realize something, not quite dread. Not yet, but something quieter. Like when a kettle stops whistling too early, not because the water's done, but because the flame's gone out underneath. I started writing a list on the back of an envelope. Stavu cottage walking. Shoes, allergy meds for Max, refill prescription, lemon loaf, maybe, a passport, lip balm. I set the pen down. I stared at the list. Then I folded the envelope and slipped it into my purse, just in case. Just in hope, because at that point, I still thought they cared. I was still waiting, still believing that the promise meant something. That maybe, just maybe, the house by the sea would hold a place for me too. But as the days quieted, and my phone sat still on the table, I began to hear the first echo of the truth I would spend the summer learning. That sometimes what you're preparing for ... never arrives. And the real trip is the one you never planned to take. The calls didn't stop all at once. They faded. Like a song being turned down in a far room. Like music you only notice is gone once the silence settles. At first I told myself Madison was busy, the boys had school, Peter was traveling for work, and Lacey had taken on a new client. Life, I thought. That was all. Life pulling them under for a bit, as it does. I didn't want to hover, didn't want to seem needy, so I waited. I've always been good at waiting. It had been 3 weeks since that Mother's Day brunch. Sunlight had started shifting by then, just slightly, that gentle summer glare that makes the dust in my hallway shimmer. I kept the house tidy in case they dropped by. I vacuumed the guest room and folded the cream quilt at the end of the bed. The lemon loaf recipe card stayed, propped against the toaster like a reminder that the exit promise was still alive. I'd started keeping my cell phone volume on high. I checked it more often, even at night, just in case Madison called late after the boys were asleep. But there was nothing. No follow-up, no itinerary, no group text, no shared folder with beach house pictures. Nothing but the faint memory of her voice on the phone saying, "You'll need your passport." Once, when I was about 9, I got lost in the fabric section of McKinley's department store. My mother had said, "Stay close," but I wandered into a maze of patterned bolts and floral rolls taller than I was. The world closed in with colors and cotton and silence. I didn't cry. It just stood very still and waited. She found me eventually, but not before I understood in my small bones what it meant to be forgotten for a minute too long. This felt like that, but longer. Jeanette called one morning and asked if the trip was still happening. She was putting together a calendar for book club over the summer and wanted to make sure I wouldn't miss the July meetup. I hesitated. They haven't confirmed yet, I said. You know how families are always adjusting. Jeanette was kind enough not to press, but I could hear the curiosity and the pause that followed. I left a voicemail for Madison that afternoon. It's just a light one. I said I hoped they were all well, that I was thinking of them, that I had some sunscreen from last year and wasn't sure if I needed to get new bottles for the trip. No reply. I tried again 2 days later, this time by text. Just a photo of the lemon loaf with a caption. Guess what I've been testing early. She liked the photo, nothing else. The slowest kind of loneliness is the kind that tiptoes. It doesn't crash in or announce itself. It just replaces warm things with silence, like a house where someone's been turning off lights one by one. Peter used to call years ago on the drive home from work. He'd talk about his meetings, the new office, what the boys had done that morning. Sometimes Lacey would chime in from the passenger seat, teasing him about his tie or reminding him to pick up eggs. They always put me on speaker. I'd listen. I didn't talk much, but I liked hearing the noise of them. Those calls stopped about a year ago. Quietly. I didn't notice at first. But then one day I realized I hadn't heard Peter's voice in months. Not in any real way. Just brief. How are you comments when Madison passed me to him during holidays, and now even that was gone. I dusted the bookshelf one afternoon and found the old photo album, the one with the fabric cover Madison gave me 15 years ago, back when people still printed photos. It had a little note inside the front, to Mom, so you never forget how much you're loved. I sat on the edge of the sofa and turned through the pages. Peter, at age 5. Muddy and grinning. Madison on her high school graduation day, cheeks. Red from the sun, the three of us at the lake house. I had a sun hat on, same style as now. They were holding sparklers. I remember the smell of burgers on the grill. And the way Peter clung to my elbow, scared the sparks might land on his sleeve. I closed the album carefully. I didn't cry. Not yet. But the distance was stretching. I could feel it like a thread pulled too tight. Sunday mornings used to be sacred. They'd all come over after church. I'd make waffles, set the table with my mother's china. The boys would play with the wooden train set I kept in the linen closet. Peter would read the comics. Lacey would scroll her phone, but at least she was present. Now Sundays passed in silence. I still made tea for one, still buttered toast, still laid out a napkin habit, not hope. But the silence had shape now. It filled the corners like a second presence. I started talking more to the neighbor's cat. He waits at the corner of my porch every morning. I named him Marvin. His real name is probably something grander, Zeus or Archie, but I prefer Marvin. He has quiet eyes and a patient stare. Some mornings I'd bring him a bit of tuna on a plate, and while he ate, I'd talk softly. Do you think they're planning something big, Marvin? Maybe a surprise? Maybe that's why it's so quiet. Never answered, of course, but he never walked away either. In early June, I received a birthday invitation from Jeanette's daughter, Abigail. She was turning 40 and having a garden party. I held the invitation in my hand and hesitated. What if the trip landed on the same weekend? What if I missed the message? What if they finally called? IRSVPD. No. Then crossed it out. Then wrote, maybe, and tucked the card into the kitchen drawer. Just in case. One night, around 10:15, I heard a ping from my phone. My heart jumped. But it wasn't Madison. It was the bank. Notification about a transfer. I sighed and set the phone down, and it hit me. Harder than I expected that I didn't know the last time any of them had called just to hear my voice. Not to ask for something, not to confirm an event, but simply to say, "Hi, Mom." Not even that. There's a strange ache that comes with realizing you are becoming a faded painting in your own family's gallery. Not gone, not erased, but something they pass by quickly now, a frame gathering dust. The world keeps a moving forward, and I am still here, still folding towels, still setting out extra spoons, still keeping the lemon loaf recipe within reach, still waiting to be remembered the day I took the linen skirt down from the closet door. I didn't cry. I refolded it carefully and slid it back into the drawer. I didn't remove the tag. I just didn't want to see it anymore. There's a quiet that falls in the days before betrayal, though you don't know it's betrayal yet. You think maybe it's just busyness or forgetfulness or time zones or the weather. You give every benefit of the doubt because you raised them, because you changed their diapers and packed their school lunches and stayed up when they were sick, because your love was unconditional. And so your waiting is too, until something shifts and you realize it's not the storm before the celebration, it's the absence before the truth. And the truth was coming, even if I couldn't hear it yet. It was a Sunday when I found out. The kind of Sunday where the light comes in too quietly, like it knows it's not welcome. I'd made myself a boiled egg and half a grapefruit, a breakfast that used to make Peter groan when he was 12. This is what astronauts eat, he'd whine, poking the egg suspiciously. I was halfway through the grapefruit when my phone buzzed. Not a call, just a notification. Instagram. I don't use it much. Madison set it up for me years ago, so I could see the boys' school projects and vacation photos. I rarely post, but I still scroll like peeking through a keyhole into a house I once lived in. That morning, the notification was from Lacey. She had posted a photo. The image loaded slowly. My Wi-Fi tends to lag. It was a shot of a seaside porch, white railings, a row of Adirondack chairs, blue sky, blurred wine glasses, and bare toes pointed toward the ocean. The caption read, "The coast is clear. Finally made it. Hashtag family retreat. Hashtag Sundays there were 5 chairs. 5. Not 6. I stared at the photo until the light shifted on the screen. I looked closer. There was a wide straw hat tossed on the arm of one chair. One of the boys' sand toys on the deck. A pair of adult feet, probably Peter's, with a green anklet I didn't recognize. I tried to click through to see more, and I did. A series of photos loaded, Madison and Lacey clinking glasses with pale pink drinks, the boys on paddleboards, a group shot with a caption, "Family Week." Memories in the making. And in the very center, Peter with one arm around Madison, the other around Lacey, smiling. Everyone accounted for, except me. I didn't cry right away. I clicked through every photo, squinting, thinking maybe I'd see a folded beach towel I had given them, or the lemon loaf wrapped in foil on the counter, or a reflection in a window that was mine. But there was nothing, no trace of me, not even a mention, no tag, no wish you were here, no memory of the woman who ironed the skirt and packed the allergy meds and waited in silence. Just family retreat. I set the phone down and stood, very still in the kitchen. The egg had gone cold. The grapefruit sweat in its bowl. Something hollow opened in my chest, not sharp, just wide, like the space they had carved out for me and then quietly left empty. I walked into the living room, sat on the edge of the couch, and pulled the travel wallet from the drawer. I opened it slowly. There were 5 $50 bills inside. Crisp, folded, untouched. I laid them out on the coffee table like petals, and I realized something that made my hands tremble. They never meant for me to come. Not ever. The betrayal wasn't in the forgetting, it was in the pretending, the performance of inclusion. The illusion of a place for me dangled like a carrot, then quietly pulled away once I had smiled and thanked them for offering it. I told myself I needed air, so I walked down past the church, past the corner where Marvin usually sits. He wasn't there. Past the bakery with the dusty window. At the corner mailbox. I stopped. I opened it and found 2 envelopes. One was junk. The other was from the bank. A monthly statement. I tore it open out of habit, walking slowly, and that's when I saw it. A transfer, $3,000.2. Peter's joint account on May 22ND. Labeled Trip Advance per M. Stopped in the middle of the sidewalk. My hands went cold. I reread the line. Trip Advance. My trip. The one I wasn't on? The one with 5 chairs instead of 6? I sat on the low brick wall in front of the hardware store. The sun was too warm on my back. I opened the banking app, blinking hard. There were more transfers. Smaller ones. $600 in March. Ticket holding, $85 in April beach gear. $420 in early May. Resort deposit, all with notes in Madison's tone. Casual, entitled, My account. Slowly siphoned by the people who didn't even save me a chair. It wasn't the money. Not really. I'd offered it. I'd always said, if you ever need help planning something special, use whatever's there. Just let me know. But I said that with trust. With the assumption that I was part of the special, that I was invited to the joy I was funding. I walked home with the envelope clutched, tight in my hand. When I reached the porch, Marvin was there again. He blinked up at me, slow and curious. I didn't say anything this time. I just sat beside him and let the truth settle on my shoulders like the shawl I hadn't worn since spring. I didn't text. I didn't call. I didn't comment on the post. Instead, I opened the drawer with the recipe box and took out the lemon loaf card. I stared at the words for a long time. Then I folded it in half and slid it beneath the ceramic fruit bowl. Later that night, I logged back into Instagram. The post had a dozen comments. Friends saying how beautiful the place looked. Someone asked, "Is that your mom's famous lemon loaf on the counter?" Lacey replied, "Haha, no, just a bakery this time. We tried." With a winking emoji, and I think that's what broke the last piece of me. Not the money. Not the missing chair. But the joke. The flippant little laugh at the end of something that used to mean love. The loaf had always been the glue. When they were sick, when they were tired, when life was loud, it was the thing I made that told them, I see you. I care. I'm still here. And now it was a punchline, a shrug, a replacement from a bakery shelf. I turned off the phone. I closed the app. I sat in the quiet and listened to the fridge hum. I stared at the linen skirt hanging again on the outside of my closet door, and I knew with a clarity that wrapped around my chest like wire that the part of me who believed in them still had just died. Calmly, silently, without a scream. Just a quiet exhale, like the final note of a song that no one bothered to finish. It was a Thursday when I dialed Peter's number, late afternoon. The light outside was low and flat, the kind that makes every room feel a little too honest. I didn't plan what I'd say. I just knew I had to hear his voice, not as a mother hoping, but as a woman deciding. He answered on the third ring. His voice sounded like it always had, casual, competent, tired. "Hey, Mom, everything okay?" Everything was not okay. But I'd stopped announcing my feelings to people who made sport of ignoring them. I saw the pictures. I said. There was a pause. "What pictures?" he asked, like a man already climbing the ladder of excuses. Lacey posted them. The family. Trip, the 5 chairs. He exhaled. That was all. Just a sigh, like I'd brought up a chore he'd forgotten to do. "Look, it wasn't we were going to tell you. It was complicated." "You didn't forget," I said quietly. "You planned it this way." He didn't deny it. Not outright. That silence, that moment he didn't fill, told me more than anything. I wasn't mistaken. I wasn't confused. I wasn't being, as Lacey liked to say, sensitive. I was erased. I saw the bank statements. I said, the transfers. The notes Madison left. Another pause. "Longer this time, you said I could use that money," he finally replied. "You always said it was for family. I thought I was family. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I just said it like a fact. Like saying the sky is blue or the eggs are gone. I waited for him to push back, to explain, to stammer. Instead, he sighed again. And then he said something I'll never forget. "Mom, it's just, you make things complicated. You get emotional." Lacey didn't want the trip to become a guilt thing. A guilt thing. My voice cracked, not from rage, but from something colder. The sound of disbelief crystallizing. I bake cookies. I pack sunscreen. I wait by the phone. That's complicated. You always expect too much, he said. And then you get upset when people don't meet your expectations. It's exhausting, Mom. We wanted a break from everything. It's from everything. Everything which included me. You used my money. I had to say it again, just to hear how it landed. You used my money, I repeated, to fund a vacation you excluded me from, and then posted about it like I didn't exist. That wasn't the intention, he said. You're twisting this. I sat down on the dining chair, the one with the worn patch where Peter used to rock backward until I scolded him. Tell me the intention. Then, I said. He was quiet. Then we thought you wouldn't enjoy it. Madison said you were having hip trouble again. Lacey thought you might need extra care, and we didn't want to spend the whole week worrying. It was supposed to be a reset. So you? Reset your family by cutting out the woman who built it. Another pause. You're being dramatic, he said. There it was. The word dot. The word that turns aging women into caricatures. That tells us our pain is exaggerated, our grief performative, our disappointment hysterical, dramatic, as if this whole betrayal were a scene. I'd written instead of a truth I discovered. I didn't argue, I didn't yell, instead. I looked down at my hands. There was a pink scar on my index finger from slicing apples to thin for Max's lunchbox years ago. I ran my thumb across it and remembered the feel of the sandwich crusts. I used to cut into hearts, the old thermos lids, the way Madison liked her tea cooled with a splash of milk. Even at 8, I remembered everything. They remembered nothing. I won't ask why, I said. I know now. You didn't want me. You didn't think I'd fit. You didn't have the courage to tell me outright. He tried to interrupt. I didn't let him, but you took the money. You took my silence. You took my love and turned it into inconvenience. You labeled it as emotional debt. You rewrote me as a burden. There was a rustling on his end. Maybe he stood up. Maybe he started pacing. Maybe Lacey walked into the room and raised an eyebrow. I didn't care. You know what hurts? That I would have forgiven you, even after the photos, okay? Even after the lie. If you had just said, we were wrong, he didn't. Instead, he said, you're blowing this out of proportion, Mom. Maybe this is why we needed space. I nodded, though he couldn't see me. I see, I whispered. Thank you for clarifying. Then I ended the call. Not in anger, but in clarity. The kind that settles like a stone at the bottom of a deep, still lake. I didn't call Madison. I didn't need to. Her silence had already spoken, and it said, you are a relic, something to be admired from afar. Dusted off occasionally, but not held too close. Not brought into the frame. That evening, found the broken frame in the hallway closet. It had held a family photo from the boy's baptism. I took it out. The glass had long since cracked. I ran my finger along the splintered edge, then slipped the photo out. Peter, smiling too wide. Madison in blue. Me in the background, holding Max with one arm and the baby bag with the other. Half out of focus. Always half out of focus. I flipped the photo into the drawer with the lemon loaf recipe. I folded a napkin over it and I closed the drawer slowly. There's something oddly calm about grief when it's longer fresh. When it's settled in your chest like dust on a shelf, you stop flinching. You just see, and I saw everything now. The performance, the distance. The edits they made to their version of family. One where I had become a character too. It's difficult to write, so they erased me and then they spent my ink. But I still had the paper. I still had the pen, and I was ready to begin writing something else. Not for them, for me. That night, I opened the desk drawer and pulled out the will. I placed it gently beside me, turned on the lamp, and began to read. Not in anger, not in haste, but in resolve. Because the woman they called dramatic. She was done, not wounded, not waiting, done. And that is a very different thing. The next morning, I made tea, slowly, not the usual blend I drank out of habit. I chose the good one, the white rose oolong I'd been saving for guests who never came. I used a porcelain teacup with a chipped rim that reminded me of my mother's garden bench, weathered, still standing and beautiful anyway. I carried the cup to the dining table, opened the manila folder, and laid out my will. I hadn't looked at it in 4 years. The last time was after my hip surgery, when Madison had brought me soup and said, "You should get things in order, Mom, just in case." Back then, I listened. I signed the lines. I left everything neat. I listed them all. Peter, Madison, even Lacey, not out of affection, but because I thought it would bring harmony. I thought fairness would prevent conflict later. I was wrong. They didn't want fairness. They wanted access to the house, to the money, to the woman who said yes too often and asked for too little in return. And so I picked up a pen. This time, I didn't hesitate. I called an attorney. A woman named Ruth, someone Jeanette had used when her husband passed. Ruth answered on the third ring and listened without interrupting. I didn't tell her everything, just enough. She said gently, "It's never too late to change your legacy." That stayed with me, not because it was poetic, but because it was practical. I booked an appointment for Thursday, that afternoon. I walked through the house like a guest, room by room. I looked at the things I had kept for them. The heirlooms I'd preserved under the illusion that someone would care. The china Madison never asked for. The photo albums Peter never opened. The quilt I'd made the year Max was born, folded carefully in the linen closet, never touched. Again, I had kept these things like promises, but they had been broken, quietly and completely, so I began to let them go. I boxed up old holiday decorations and took them to the church donation bin. I gave away 3 coats. I threw out 2 expired bottles of allergy medicine I'd once packed for the trip that never came, and I walked back into my bedroom and opened the drawer with a recipe box. This time, didn't take out the lemon loaf. I took out the deed, the original copy. Folded once, still crisp. The house had been mine since 1989, paid off slowly, month by month. Grocery sacrifices, coupon stacks, extra shifts. After my husband passed, it became more than just a roof. It became proof that I could carry something heavy and not drop it. It was more than wood and walls. It was me. They had asked about it last year. Casually, Peter had said, "We could renovate the upstairs, maybe add an office. It's such a shame the space just sits there." Lacey had joked about renting it out. "You'd make great Airbnb money. People love these quaint older homes," Madison had said. "It just needs some love. And you know, young families need space now, Mom." I had smiled, unsure. Now I understood. They weren't looking for a home to visit. They were planning an inheritance to rewire. I sat at my desk and wrote a short letter. Not legal, just emotional for myself. This house was never a placeholder. It was where I lived, where I grieved, where I rebuilt, and it deserves better than to be picked over like a carcass before I've even cooled. On Thursday, I took the bus to Ruth's office, wore my nicest scarf. It's a green one, embroidered with tiny branches. It's the one Madison had called a bit much. The last time I wore it, I felt strong in it. The office smelled like lavender and carpet glue. Ruth was kind and brisk, the kind of woman who keeps tissues and peppermints in the same drawer. She handed me the new documents, fresh and clean. My name bold at the top. Together, we rewrote everything. I removed Peter and Madison from the primary line. I removed Lacey altogether. I added a scholarship fund for girls in foster care who wanted to study botany or music. It's 2 things I loved but was told were impractical. I added Jeanette, who always answered my calls. I added a local hospice center that had cared for my sister with gentleness when the end came. And I added a clause. The house, upon my passing, would be sold, and the proceeds used only for purposes unrelated to Family, not out of bitterness, out of freedom. Because my legacy did not belong to those who abandoned me. Ruth slid the papers into a blue folder. "You're sure?" she asked. I nodded, not fiercely, calmly, the way a woman nods when the water has finally stilled. That weekend, called a realtor, a young woman named Tanya. She wore flats instead of heels and looked at my house with quiet respect. Not the kind of respect that comes from price tags, but from sensing a life had happened inside. I didn't tell her the full story, just enough. She asked if I was moving for family. I smiled and said, "No, I'm moving for peace." I had her. List the house off market. No signs, no noise. Just a few quiet viewings, one at a time. I didn't want it to be spectacle. I wanted it to be a passing, a letting go. Tanya nodded. She understood. Some women do. 3 weeks later, it sold to a retired librarian and her partner, 2 women who wanted a garden and a sunroom to read in. They loved the light. They promised to keep the rosebush. I left the lemon loaf recipe on the counter. No note, just the card, tucked beside the window. Where the light came in, I packed only what mattered. My mother's brooch, the green scarf, a small suitcase with 2 dresses and the walking shoes I never used for the trip. And I left everything else, not in a hurry, not in sadness, but in relief. I moved into a quiet apartment across town, 3rd floor, no elevator, but I climbed it anyway. There's a balcony with just enough space for 2 chairs and a plant stand. I bought a fern, named it Grace. No one called to ask where I'd gone. No one asked about the house. The family trip came and went. They posted more photos. The boys in matching t-shirts, Lacey holding a margarita, Peter in a hammock with his eyes closed. And once, just once, a comment appeared on one of Madison's posts from an old friend of hers. "Did your mom come too? Miss seeing her bakes?" There was no reply, just a deletion. That was when I knew I had done the right thing. When my name became an inconvenience. Even to the pixels. But here's the thing about reinvention. It doesn't have to be loud sometimes. It's the quiet changing of locks, slipping off of old rings. It's the signing of a line that says, "No more pretending you belong." Sometimes reinvention looks like a woman sipping tea on a balcony, watching the world go on and knowing she's no longer asking for space in a story she wrote the first half of. She's writing something else now, and in this one, she owns every word. I disappeared without a suitcase, on the porch, or a note by the door. Not because I wanted to punish them, but because I didn't want to explain myself anymore. There comes a moment when the last conversation is behind you, and you don't even realize it was the last until you're months out. Ain't nothing in you wants to go back for a reply. That's how it happened for me, not in a scream, but in a pause that never resumed. I left the old phone on the counter when I moved out of the house. Switched to a new number, not hidden, just unlisted. Not angry, just unreachable. I didn't send a forwarding address. I didn't need to. They'd never bothered to ask for it. Not even after the trip. Not even after the money. Not even after. The silence began to spread like fog across the days. At first I thought they'd notice. That the quiet would rattle them. That they'd call, text, wonder, knock, but a week passed. Then to and the world stayed quiet. Madison posted a picture of a back-to-school lunchbox. Peter posted a photo of Max with a soccer trophy. Lacey posted a filtered selfie on a balcony that wasn't mine. The captions were breezy, the smiles were wide, and my absence had become part of the decor. Like a photo frame quietly removed from a shelf before guests. Arrived out one afternoon, went through my contacts and began to delete. Madison's number gone. Peter's gone. Lacey had never been saved under a name. It's just Peter's wife. She was gone too. I unfollowed. I muted. I disconnected the old landline. I'd kept out of habit. And when the bill came in for the family phone plan, they still had me paying for. I canceled it, not with malice, with precision. With the click of a checkbox that said, "Not responsible anymore." Jeanette called once a week. She was one of the few who knew my new address. We had tea every other Sunday in the little cafe below my apartment. The one with too many plants and soft jazz that no one really listens to. She never asked for details. She just said things like, "You seem more rested." Or, "You're not waiting anymore, are you?" Oh. And I'd smile into my tea, because that was the truth of it. I wasn't waiting, not for calls, not for apologies, not for explanations. Silence had become a garden I watered each day, quiet, lush, full of things that only grew when I stopped begging them to be something else. In late August, I passed Peter at the grocery store. He didn't see me. He was at the self-checkout, buying snack bars and sparkling water. Max stood beside him, taller now, earbuds in. I stood in the next aisle, frozen behind the stack of paper towels. My heart didn't race. It slowed, like my body recognized that the storm had passed. And all that was left was wind in an empty corridor. I turned before he could look up, walked out without milk. They tried once, just once, in September. An email arrived from Madison. Subject: "We need to talk." No greeting, no warmth, just a handful of lines. "We noticed you've been out of touch. Peter said you're not answering. Can you please explain what's going on? This is really unfair to the kids." I stared at it for a long time, not because I was unsure how to respond, but because I realized I didn't need to. The old version of me, the one who bought extra beach towels and pre-chilled lemonade for their visits, she would have replied. She would have poured her hurt into paragraphs and prayed for a reply that never stung. But I was not her anymore, so I archived the email. Didn't delete it, just filed it in a folder called Unanswered. There's something holy about choosing not to explain your absence to those who never asked about your presence. Some mornings, I'd sit on my balcony with Grace, the fern, and watch the sun move slowly across the roofs. I read novels without checking the time. I made French toast for one and didn't apologize for eating it late. I started painting again. I had stopped for decades ever since. Peter said the oil smell gave him headaches, and Madison called my sketch of the old elm tree weird. But now, no one knocked. No one criticized. And the canvas didn't care how old my hands were. One morning, I painted a single chair, wooden, weathered, sitting at the edge of a bluff. No one in it, no one near it, just the sea behind, sky above. I called it Room 2. Breathe. Hung it in the hallway, where only I would see it. In October, I received a letter from the family's old accountant. Apparently, Peter had asked for a summary of shared financial records. There was a polite inquiry about the house. I sent back a single page with 3 sentences. The house was sold in July. Proceeds were redirected. No further discussion will be entertained. No signature, no closing, just a period at the end. Of a sentence I had rewritten for myself by December, the tree went up in my apartment, small, tabletop-sized, decorated with things I had made instead of things I had been given. No family ornaments, no old hooks from second-grade art projects, just hand-tied ribbons, soft lights, and silence. And it was beautiful. I had never realized how heavy being available had been. How often I'd said, "Sure," when I meant "this hurts." How many times I'd picked up the phone out of duty, not desire. How I'd watered a garden they'd already paved over. But now I saw it. And once you see it, you don't go back. I was not missing. I was gone. On purpose, I didn't vanish like smoke. I withdrew, like tide, steady, clean, certain. I didn't leave the family. They left me long ago. They just expected me to stay seated while they did it. And when I finally stood, they called it abandonment. But at WASN, single quotes, it was liberation. In early January, I got a postcard. No name, no message, just a beach photo. Likely from a stand in Santa Barbara. 5 chairs again. But this time, I felt nothing, just quiet. And gratitude that I was no longer waiting for a 6th. Some revenges are loud. But mine wore soft shoes. Mine was a quiet exit. Clean inbox. A legal signature. A phone that didn't ring. A life that breathed again, they told me. Once, that family was everything. But I've learned everything that forgets. You isn't family, and silence can be the loudest no they'll ever hear. 1 year later, the light in my apartment falls a little differently. It spills in through the gauzy curtains. I stitched myself, warm and pale, like the kind of light that doesn't ask for attention but gets it anyway. Everything here is soft, from the cushion covers to the ticking of the old mantel clock. Even the quiet hum of the world beyond my window has changed. Or maybe I have. I used to crave voices, proof, footsteps, family. Now I crave stillness. The sound of my own thoughts folding in and out like the tide. This is peace. Not the kind wrapped in ribbons and reconciliation, but the kind you build alone. Brick by brick, after the fire has gone out, I've stopped marking holidays. I let them pass like clouds, some slow and heavy, others light and unbothered. I don't hang wreaths. I don't bake with expectations. I make meals I enjoy, set the table for one, and light a candle because I want to, not because someone's coming. They don't come anymore, but I don't wait anymore. Either my days are quieter, fuller. I volunteer. Twice a week at the library, shelving books and helping little girls write poems about frogs and stars. I joined a walking group of women who all wear wide-brimmed hats and refuse to walk quietly. We laugh loudly. We point at clouds shaped like bread rolls. We don't talk about our grown children unless someone's grieving, and even then, we say just enough and no more. There is no pressure here to prove we are still needed. Only the joy of discovering we are still here and still becoming. One morning in spring, there was a knock at my door. Not a loud one, just a gentle tapping, as though someone didn't know if they should be here. When I opened it, I found Max, my grandson, older now. His shoulders broader, his voice deeper, but his eyes still wide, still unsure, just like the day he'd clung to my elbow at the lake house, terrified of the sparkler. He held a small paper bag in his hand and a silence in his throat. "Mom said you moved," he mumbled, eyes down. But she didn't say where. I nodded, waited. I asked Dad. He added. He didn't know. Or said he didn't. Another pause. "I found your name on a painting in the town gallery. Said you donated it. The one with the chair. A room to breathe?" I smiled faintly. "So I searched you up. The librarian told me you came in Tuesdays." He held out the paper bag. Inside was a lemon loaf store bought. I could tell by the texture, but I accepted it anyway. I didn't invite him in, right? Away. Instead, we sat on the balcony. 2 chairs. One fern, no questions. Eventually, he asked if I was okay. I said I was. "Are you mad at me?" he asked. "No," I replied gently. "You were just a boy in a house that didn't speak my name anymore." He looked away, then back. "I remember. The cookies," he said. "The ones with the cinnamon sugar. I thought about them last week. Weird, right?" Not weird. Memory knows where love once lived. He stayed for tea, told me about school, his music. Lacey had redecorated the living room in neutrals and how it now felt like a very rich waiting room. I didn't comment. I didn't ask about Madison or Peter. I didn't ask if they missed me. That's not what this was. This wasn't reunion. This was recognition. A small moment of truth. Carried up the stairs and left gently at my door. After he left, I didn't cry. I stood at the window and watched him walk down the street. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. Some visits are meant to be brief little blessings, not invitations. I didn't expect to see him again, but I was glad he came. The truth is, I don't need them to apologize. I've stopped rehearsing speeches in the shower, stopped pretending. The phone will ring with their names. I used to think closure came in words, but a DOESN. It comes in the choice to stop waiting, and the moment you do, you realize you're not lost to them. They're lost to you. And you're finally found. One night I sat on my balcony and wrote a list. Not a to-do list, not goals. It's just a small inventory of what I'd reclaimed. My mornings, my name, my sleep, my house, my silence, my story, I folded the list and placed it inside the old recipe box. Not under the lemon loaf, beside it. Because even grief, once baked into something warm, can still nourish what's left. I've started painting again, not for galleries. For me, there's a canvas in the corner with a single image, a woman's back seated on a bench beneath a tree. Not waiting, not watching, just sitting. I call it still. Some people confuse peace with passivity. They think if you didn't fight loud, you must not have been hurt deeply. But peace, real peace, isn't quiet because it's soft. It's quiet because it's sure. Because it no longer needs to shout to be heard. When people ask where my children are now, I say they're living their lives. And when they ask if we're close, I say I'm closer to myself now than I've ever been. No one asks more than that. They see it in the way I stand. They hear it in the calm that doesn't beg to be seen. Once I lived in the middle of my family like a coat rack, useful background always there. Now I live at the center of my own life, and I decorate it with things that don't need explaining. Lavender soap, a mug I bought myself, books with broken spines, a scarf no one ever borrows. If you asked me what I miss, I'd tell you I miss the idea of them, not the reality. I miss the memory of being included, even if it wasn't real. But I don't want them back, because peace is not about restoration, it's about release. And I have released them without bitterness, without drama, just a door closed in a house I no longer live in. Sometimes I hear mothers in the market calling out to children who don't listen, and I smile, remembering the sound of myself, not with sorrow, but with softness. I was that woman once, and loved well, even if they didn't stay to remember it. I am not the woman who waited by the phone. Not the woman who set extra plates for guests who never arrived. Not the woman who froze at the sound of "you're being dramatic." I am the woman who left quietly. The woman who rewrote the ending. The woman who painted her piece, and if they ever come knocking years from now with weathered eyes and unsure hands, I will not be cruel, but I will not open the door too wide, because some bridges aren't meant to burn, but they are meant to remain closed.